All right, so going back into your camera properties, making sure you have your camera selected. One of the things is about selecting your cameras is you select the camera, you go up to, hang on, open up my little panel up here, sorry, view, camera, because you can have multiple cameras in the world, but you'll need to set which camera is going to be active for rendering. You have an active camera or set to active object as a camera. So we're going to say set to active. It's only one camera in the world. It automatically puts it in place. You can see it once it goes through. Now, once your models become super complex, and if your computer can manage to render one frame, even if it takes 10 hours to render one frame, you can at least get one frame out of it, right? It's a glorious thing when you can get one rendering out. But on average, most people's renders for really complex lighting and stuff can probably take an hour to do a single frame. That sounds crazy. Now, if you're doing an animation that is 24 frames per second and you have 3 minutes of animation to render, do the maths. It becomes massive. It can end up probably taking an entire term just to export the project. And that's kind of out of one computer. Have you guys ever heard of the term of farming? It's basically as the namesake. So the pig, and we're going to farm the pig. Funny, right? All right. Farming a pig. So farming is we're going to render out each frame on a different computer. So each computer will do a single frame. So frame 1, computer 1 takes 1 hour, does one frame. But then computer 2 is working on frame 2. It takes an hour as well. But now there's 2 frames in that 1 hour. Does that make sense? Do the maths. How many computers you have in an average school? You got 26. You can do 26 frames in 1 hour. There you go. You got
put it all together?
yeah, it's better than a term on one computer. So how this works is we render each one as an individual image. This is industry standard operation. No one ever renders out a video out of Blender. That is complete and utter disaster. Because if something goes wrong, the whole thing collapses. But if one frame goes missing, big deal. You can render that single frame out. So there's different types of file formats to choose from. Up here in a little thing that looks like a back of a camera, the render properties. The engine we're going to use is Eevee, which is what we have here. Ambient occlusion turns on the fine shadows. Who knows what ambient occlusion actually is? This is one of those things where, once again, lighting and all of that is...
Subscattering or light surfaces.
Exactly. So we have a surface. We have an object on the surface. This is glass, right? It's casting a shadow. It is. Everything casts a shadow. But if you look very closely at the very corner of the edge that hits that edge, there's a tiny little shadow, a fine detail one. That one is ambient occlusion. So it's the shadows that are hidden. You turn them on, everything suddenly looks way better. Bloom is the lighting effect, where the light hits the surface. Now kids get too excited when they see bloom. They go, ooh, let's make it really intense. Like that. No, that's more like a dream sequence. All right, blooming is the light that goes into the skin, glows, and then outputs. Like right now, there's a bloom about you. There is the light distortion in my eyes. When I look at the lighting, there's like a haloing occur. That's blooming. That's a sense of reality. You can change the color of the bloom to match your environment. Let's say it's a warm afternoon. Do you see the difference? If I go to the extreme ends, see how it suddenly glows a little purple? This is a more organic, warm, happy moment in time. We'll give it a nice warmer tones. Screen space reflections. Anything that has reflections, like the eyes, for example. Look at that bad boy. Look at him. Anything with his eyes, you want reflections, you've got to go ahead and turn on the reflections. All of this is so important. But up here in the sampling, it says 64 samples. 64 samples, meaning it needs to render this thing 64 times to get the lighting and everything working and give you a nice quality. Right now, what we're seeing is only 16 samples. So when I render this out, it's going to be X amount better. Does that make sense? For most rendering, good quality rendering, you're looking at least 120 samples. For real mint rendering, you're looking at 1,024 samples. If you're looking for some real crispy, absolutely stunning hyperrealism, the bare minimum is 4,000 samples. Reality, like for example, if you ever see big ocean scenes that they render out, that's something like 100 million samples. That means that one computer has to render 100 million repetitions of that single frame to get that hyper-realistic stuff. Farming helps that process. Never, by the way, ever on anyone's computer push it past 300. You can try to push it past 1,000. It will work, but it will take so long. Okay, just trust me. It's pain and suffering. Unless you got really amazing computers at your school. So I'm going to go to 124 on the samplings on my render. I'm not going to change the viewport one because that doesn't matter. All right. I can go up to right now and go render image, and this will give me an idea of how long it's going to take to do one frame. Now remember, I spent about $4,000 on this computer. It's got the latest chip to pop that out. Okay, at that sampling. And can you see the difference between that one and that one? You zoom in to really get the difference. The funny thing is, on most people's screens, they won't even see the imperfections. Unless you got a 4K display and you look right close to the screen. But it all adds to the final thing. Now we saw that didn't take too long, so that's good. But look very closely at the RAM. 193.2 megabytes of your RAM to generate this one single image. Some maths time. So in part of the stage 6, you're doing the calculations, right? This is 10 seconds of animation. How much RAM is it going to need? Lots. We're talking about gigabytes. So this is where things begin to slow down. Now it will, once it renders one, it's going to dump it and free up the RAM. So it's not going to need it for that much all the time. But just to give you an idea. To actually render this out and farm it is right here. That looks like a printer. If we click on that, we come down to the output setting. First, we have the resolution. So 1920 by 1080, do we know what that is?
High definition.
High definition. 4K is 3260 by 2080, something like that. I don't know, I can't remember from the top of my head. If you want 4K. All right, if you want 8K, 11K, you got to know the resolutions and change it. 1080 is fine for now. Your frame rate. Changing your frame rate from 24 to 12 to 120. If you're doing like 120 frames, that means for 1 second of footage, how many frames? 120. So if you want to do high speed, like slow motion stuff, you set to 120 frames. But that means you needed to animate for 120 frames. Okay? For the one frame. Now we've seen how crazy this ends up becoming. So when you go to watch a movie now, on average, let's say Frozen, okay? That's a full 3D animation. The only reason I know this is because my brother is an animator at Disney, and I know the file size of Frozen. Frozen itself was 140 petabytes of images. A petabyte. There is exabytes. Now their latest stuff is in the exabyte level. Exabyte is 100,000 petabytes, or 1,000 petabytes, which is 100,000 terabytes, million terabytes. That's a lot of data. And these are pictures, by the way, not videos, is pictures. So,
I think the worst was the one with the Disney movie with the long hair. The girl
Tangled.
Tangled because every hair was animated.
Yeah, that's my brother. He actually wrote the script, make the hair do the things. So to look at it over here in the output settings, just so you guys understand, right here in the compression, we want no compression. We want high quality. Irony. The irony is when you have no compression, it renders faster. Why? Why would it render faster if it's going to output something bigger? Exactly. It doesn't have to apply any calculations. It doesn't have to try to compress it. Do yourself a favor. Take up more space off a drive. Reduce your render time. You're paying yourself forward. Right here in the file extensions, we want to have that tick. That's just the extension of the files. Temp folder? No. We want to make, by the way, our piggy, those are the cache files that generate the pig. Yeah, we haven't even got to that point yet. Always pick the same destination. So if you're at school, you're right, you have network drives, correct? You have that shared network drive. Perfect. Because everything needs to go to that one same folder. So I'm going to go to, this is going to be pointless to show it because it's only one computer rendering, but take my word for it. On my desktop, I'm going to call it render.
The bad news,
What?
they're getting rid of all the network drives.
Use your Google Drive. That's still a network drive. But just be mindful with that one. It really does rely on good internet. But as long as it all goes to one single folder, okay, that's the name of my render, pig. File extension, cache results, that's fine. Here are your options to choose from. Comfortable, a comfortable option is PNG. It's your safe option, okay? Everything can run a PNG, and it gives you still high quality. But those of you who are curious on what they use in the industry and why they get petabytes of results, it's this file format right here, OpenEXR. This bad boy is a thick boy. All right, this one generates the biggest files. Why does it do it? Because it saves every square inch of information on screen. Every particle, every light that's hitting that single particle, it's saving that information. So you can take all those images into After Effects and actually physically manipulate every light point inside the actual result. So color grading to the extreme. Okay, it's basically absolute pure lossless file format. So I'm going to open EXR. This is the most important component right here, image sequence. Where it has tick override, uncheck that. Uncheck it. Placeholder. Check this. What this does, and Command S, what this actually does is in that moment here, generating a placeholder, what happens is it goes, right, computer 1 is going to make frame 1. And then it decides and goes, you know what, I'm going to make frame 2 as well. And it makes a temp file frame 2. The second computer, when it starts to render, it looks for the files. And it goes, okay, frame 1, frame 2, I will do frame 3, and I will do it at frame 4. And then so on, and so on, and so on.
Assuming the files are in a network.
Assuming in their network, because they're all going to that one same folder. So it's looking for the name, and it's looking for what it can not replace. And then it just makes that frame. So we have placeholder. We have our file format to OpenEXR. Its codec is zip lossless. You can have it compressed, but then what's the point? And at that point, Command S again, you're ready to render this thing. So it's going to start at frame 1 and end at frame 250. If you only need to, if your render failed, find the missing render. Say, example, frame 15 failed, and frame to, 100, right? And it was frame 15 to 100, those ones failed because, I don't know, the computer restarted. Then you can just re-render out those missing frames. If you don't have network drives, you can actually do this with your own home computers. Let's say you lay out all your computers. You have Google Drive set up, right? You have that one destination active on all your folders, on all the computers. This is what you do. You have all the computers open. They all have the same master file. You load them up and then go File, Save As, and then you choose Computer 1, do frames 1 to 10. Computer 2, do frames 11 to 20. Computer 3, do that. You're still farming. You're still farming. The reason why you do that, if you're going to use Google Drive, is because you're compensating for the time it takes to upload the file. Does that make sense?
So to select, so each of my lab computers will have the original document, the original
Yeah.
file, and then I select the frames. But how do I send them to Google Drive?
By going up to here,
Okay.
choosing the destination folder, Google Drive. Okay? And then it will just go to that folder. And if you save the master file, and the master file is on all the computers, it has the same destination of it. Obviously, put your main Blender file in the same G folder, then you should be fine. But preferably you do it on a network because it will be a faster process. So we've got it all set up, and if we want to go to render, it is simple as, I'm going to just back to 1 and just say 10 for now. And I go up to render. This time I'm going to go render animation, all right? And then now it starts its process. So this is where I would tell the kids, no touchy, all right? You do not touch the computer. You do not want to mess with the computer in this process because it's working extremely hard. It's using everything it has to make this happen. It's going through its CPU, it's going through its GPU, it's going through its RAM. So if you all of a sudden go, oh, I want to go onto YouTube, you're going to crash the system, okay? When you want to set this up at school, in the afternoons, let it render overnight, okay? If it's a big render, probably on the Friday afternoon, let it render over the weekend. Sometimes the computers want to shut down by themselves. A lot of times Blender can override that, but it's totally recommended that you go in. If you have administration control, excellent. If you don't, find your IT person. Get them to change the power settings. Never sleep. Let the computers run all the time, non-stop. To give you guys an idea, we found out one student's project was 3,750 frames. We did it over the 2-week break. So he came in every day. We farmed it across 126 computers. Now the unfortunate side of this form of rendering, because we don't have proper render servers or anything like that, you have to manually go to every single computer and run their animation on every single one. So we just went, I'll do one computer lab, the student did one computer lab, and then we did the third and final computer lab, and we just let it cook over the weekend. We came back, make sure everything was running fine, then we just kept running cameras over and over and over again. So it was 3,750 frames. We did it over the 2-week break. By the end of it, he had over 200, he used PNGs, not OpenEXR, because if he did that, his already was about 250 gigabytes of images. It would have been about 1.5 terabytes, okay, which is pretty hard for any computer to process a terabyte worth of images. 200 was enough to really make the computer want to cry. But now, it's baked all 10. So right now, if I was to go back to my desktop, let's go back, you'll see there's a folder, and in that folder, there is 10 images. These OpenEXRs plus a JPEG for whatever reason. We don't need the JPEG. Let's get rid of all that garbage. Yes, whatever you do, please don't ever use JPEGs. It's just trash. Where it goes, in the bin, where it belongs. Okay? It's a garbage file format, and it should just, retire. So now, we have an OpenEXR. Word of warning, on Macs, it supports OpenEXR by default, so you can view it. On Windows, you don't. You have to download a codec, but it will work in After Effects and Premiere. So I keep saying about After Effects and Premiere. Well, right now you're probably thinking, okay, these are just pictures. How do I make an animation out of it, right? There's 2 ways. You can open up... Pardon?
Can you set it in the frames?
You can. So what we're going to do is, I'm just going to save this, close Blender, free up my RAM, because if I go to Media Encoder, you can actually just render it out, because in the actual EXR information, it understands what your sequence was all about. If I go up to File, Add a Source, go to my desktop. Here we go. Into render. I click on the first image. I'll look at more options. And do you see how it says open EXR sequence? So it understands straight away that this was a picture sequence, like this is actually a video sequence. So I can just go, right, sweet. Open. Yes. Allow. And now we can choose our video format. So it's now going to compile it. So this is just media encoder. Now if you want to just work with a video and not image sequences, if you go to QuickTime, you can change it to any format you want. The reason why I've got to set the QuickTime, and I go to presets, right here, Apple ProRes 422. Beautiful format. Works on Windows as well, it's just owned by Apple. It's a really high resolution video file that supports all that fine detailing, all that lovely buttery video editing stuff that you want to use. So all those video editors out there can record in Apple ProRes 422, do the same. Change the name, all right, Pig. Alrighty, and then save. Nothing else you have to worry about because there's nothing else you need to worry about. You just then hit OK, press the little play button. This actually doesn't take that long, it's instantaneous because this computer actually has built-in Apple ProRes encoders, so it just does it quickly. A lot of your students that do have Macs have the same sort of things built in. And there's my actual video file. Now this is only 10 frames, so it's going to be like a blip in time. Right, see? And there's your movie, as it is. Cool? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is an actual animation. Does anyone have any questions? No?
Yeah, how did you do the grass around the...
Yeah?